Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Psilocybin University. As always, I'm your host, Professor Stark. I hope everybody had a fantastic Christmas and a Happy New Year. I know it's been a little while since the last time that I released an episode, but I got a little caught up in day-to-day life and some personal projects that I've been working on top of some other distractions that life has to offer you. But in today's episode, in spirit of the new year, I would like to take the chance to talk a little bit about my first year of taking psilocybin mushrooms and the changes and progress that I've made, not only physically, but mentally and spiritually as well. So I'm going to go over a little bit of where I was at before the experimentation, if you want to call it, with psilocybin, and kind of ultimately where it led. Because I really started experimenting a lot with psilocybin mushrooms at the very top of the 2020 year. And maybe I did them a lot more than I should have, maybe a little bit more than most, but through all of that experimentation with psilocybin mushrooms, I surprisingly, especially to myself and to others, have made a lot of progress with myself and was able to work through a lot of personal issues that I was having and was really able to flip the script, so to speak, when it came to my mentality and my lifestyle. So that's going to be the theme for today. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode and just stick with me. I think you guys are going to find this information real interesting, and hopefully it'll be able to make people realize that psilocybin mushrooms are much more than a recreational drug, but that they can be used for mental and spiritual growth. First, I would like to share a quote that I had come up with in one of those aha moments that you typically may have while taking a shower. Because while I was in the shower, I was thinking to myself, how can I put into a few sentences the progress that I have made through the taking of psilocybin mushrooms, and ultimately the lesson that became most clearest to me? So that quote goes as follows: "There is no man more powerful than the one who has been freed from the limitations of his ego." This can describe anybody, but this quote was made with my journey and process, but this easily could be translated to anybody. And what this quote means to me and why I came up with it is that once we separate ourselves from our ego and our preconditioning of what to expect from life or what life is supposed to be all about, we are truly freed from a lot of fears that hold us back. Once the ego is obliterated, there is nothing that we can't accomplish because we are no longer limited by said ego. Egos make us make certain decisions based on preconceived consequences and fears of what others may think and how they might perceive us if we do certain things. One of the biggest things that changed about me through my experimentation of psilocybin mushrooms was I had what they call an ego death. I had one of those mushroom trips that took me down a path where any ego that I had, any preconceived notions I had about life or what to expect from life or expectations that I had for myself were completely obliterated and left me with a feeling of complete freedom. Once I realized that the ego was my biggest enemy and I finally made the decision to free myself from that ego, I was finally able to tap into my true potential and really go on a path to become the person that I always wanted to be, despite all the fears that I have had in the past of what people might think or say about me. I can't stress enough that the biggest lesson that I have learned through taking psilocybin is that the ego is the only thing that could get in your way of living your best life. And we must all learn to check our egos at the door if we truly want to be powerful and free. The death of my ego wasn't the only thing that I was able to learn from taking psilocybin mushrooms in 2020 going into 2021, but ultimately it ended up being the most important lesson that I needed to get out of my own way, to finally take steps in life to progress in a positive way. I have learned many things about myself, not only about myself, but about life through taking of psilocybin mushrooms. After almost every trip, I come out of it with some kind of a lesson or some kind of a realization or a different perspective on something that makes me see the world differently and changes my perceptions of certain things and people. It really freed me from the things that I thought were concrete and certain. It allowed me to really think outside the box, to really start seeing things how they were as opposed to how I was told they were. There's a lot of things that we are taught in life about how things are and we're not supposed to think beyond those things because those are the facts. The biggest thing with psilocybin mushrooms is they completely kick open the door for free-range thinking, if that's what you want to call it. I really can't think of a better phrase for it. They give you the ability to finally think like yourself and not think like others expect you to think. Now, some people may already have this ability or have already unlocked this ability to be able to think like this on a daily basis. But for me, in my whole life, this was not the way that I thought or felt about things. Most of my life, I always thought and made decisions based on the things that people told me and the knowledge that they forced upon me. I kind of always just went with status quo, almost like a soldier taking orders, never questioning anything. I basically let everybody define the world for me, define expectations for me, and at the end of the day, it always ended up in frustration and disappointment because I never felt like I was truly being myself. But with magic mushrooms, they were able to finally break down that flaw, I call it, because for me it was a flaw. It held me back for most of my life. But once I came to realize that I could finally think like myself and think outside the box and be who I want to be, I finally felt free and a lot happier. And ever since then, I've started making better decisions and started realizing what I really want from life and ultimately who I want to be. And I have been freed from the limitations and expectations that I let others set for me and force into my thought process. So once I started to think differently and let go of that terrible thing we all refer to as our ego and allowed myself to think for myself, that's when I started to go to work on changing my lifestyle for the better. And I stopped lying to myself about how the lifestyle that I was leading was the best one for me. I had a lot of trips where I would go into them and start discovering things about my life that desperately needed to change in order for me to maximize my potential. One of the biggest lessons I took from those analyzations of my lifestyle was that there were certain patterns that I had that I needed to break, such as my consumption of alcohol and marijuana. Now, I'm not saying that I stopped drinking or stopped smoking marijuana completely, but I started to be honest with myself about the amount of drinking and smoking of weed that I was doing was having grave consequences to my health, both mentally and physically. I spent a lot of years hiding my emotions and running away from the negative things in my life through just getting fucked up all the time, to be completely honest. I drink and smoke away my sorrows, neglecting ultimately what I wanted to do and be. I started to realize that my drinking excessively would lead to thoughts of self-loathing, regret, and depression. My use of marijuana would make me very negligent and very ignorant to a lot of things because I would just smoke, laugh away, eat a bunch of snacks, and just never take anything too seriously. Just being an excessive goofball and just not facing shit, It was having a huge impact on my health as far as my weight. Now, coming out of high school, I was in really good shape and had hopes of joining the military. Now, getting into the whole story and getting into all the details would take forever. So I'm just going to cut it short and say that certain life decisions and certain choices I made took me on a path where I had a lot of regrets for not doing what I wanted to do and trying to accommodate those around me and getting thrown into a situation where all of a sudden now I was a family man at a very young age with a child that I deeply wanted to be there for and take care of and do everything I can to make sure he led the best life possible, put a tremendous amount of stress on me. And I really started to deviate from the things I should have been doing to accomplish the goals I wanted to be the best father, boyfriend/husband that I could have been. I was always a really good father. I was always there for my son. I wasn't the perfect boyfriend/husband, but I always had a tremendous amount of love and respect and did everything I could to aid my significant other to be the best version of themselves and made a lot of sacrifices to make sure that she ended up accomplishing all her goals and getting where she ultimately wanted to be. But in the process of trying to be super dad and support the ambitions and goals of my significant other, I lost myself. I lost my identity. I didn't know who I was or who I wanted to be. I got stuck in the cycle of just being dad, husband, making decisions not for myself, but for everyone else around me. I started just doing things because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Never really thinking beyond the moment or the day. Never really thinking about too far down the future. Thinking about whatever I had to do just to survive the day. It sent me down a road mentally where I was very frustrated and disappointed because I felt like I wasn't accomplishing anything real for myself. So every chance that I got, when I didn't have to be dad and have to tend to my son, I would just throw myself into this thing where I would just drink and self-hate, constantly smoke as much weed as possible, just to numb away all of the pressures of everyday life, and never thinking beyond getting intoxicated or being a father and a husband. Never made any real plans for myself in the future. All I would tell myself, I just need to stick around long enough to ensure the safety of my child, to make as much money as necessary to pay the bills, and that was it. No real goals or ambitions or a plan of some kind of an end game where I ultimately wanted to be. So through the use of alcohol and marijuana, I gained a lot of weight, and I mean a lot of weight. And with the weight gain, I lost a lot of my confidence. I really didn't like who I was or what I looked like in the mirror. I was ashamed and embarrassed of myself. I always had a very, very negative mindset when it came to thoughts of myself. And every day that I lived that way, I was just getting further and further away from that guy who came out of high school ready to take over the world and be the best version of himself. I ultimately realized that it wasn't goals that I couldn't accomplish in life, that I really didn't have limitations. It was just the way I chose to live my life that put limitations on me and didn't allow me to grow as a person. Now, a lot of things have happened in the last 10 years of my life, especially in the last 2 to 3 years. I don't want to get into the full story now. Maybe in future episodes I'll go over a little bit of the things that I've been through and why ultimately I ended up at a crossroads where I really needed to change my life. But I just finally took a stance and told myself that if you could just start changing your patterns in life, doing different things, more positive things, it would open up new opportunities for myself. And in doing those things differently, things did start to change for the better. I started to drink way less. I started to face my emotions more. Started to fall back on my excessive use of weed, and it allowed me to stop overeating and really start focusing on my physical health again. And as a byproduct of all that stuff, within the last 3-4 months, I have lost over 45 pounds, and I'm in the best shape that I've been in at least 7-8 years. And with being in better shape and having a cleaner bill of health inside of my head, I really started focusing on my ambitions again and the things that I really wanted to accomplish, and now have the confidence to do so. I'm not completely finished with my goals in reference to my health and ambition, but I am on the right path, and I really have to credit it to the use of psilocybin. I was never going to get out of my funk if I wasn't able to deep dive into the deepest depths of my brain to figure these things out and truly analyze what was going wrong with me. My use of psilocybin mushrooms really got me back in touch with the things that made me happy, that gave me confidence, and put me in the right frame of mind to make the best decisions to be the best me possible. It brought me back to my martial arts training, which ultimately led back to better life decisions. Started treating people a lot better, being more of a peaceful person instead of so aggressive and angry. And as a byproduct of that, I have strengthened the relationships in my life that mattered, and have been able to minimize on the relationships in my life that were detrimental to me. Instead of fighting everything with anger, I was able to take a step back, analyze everything for what it was, and make choices accordingly. I've been able, for the most part, to reverse years of neglecting my health, both mentally and physically, and now I have so much more confidence and a clear vision of what I want for the future that I'm no longer fighting myself and wasting time self-loathing, and I am now starting to make huge steps towards capturing that future that I set out to have over 10 years ago. Now, some of these lessons that I have learned and some of the realizations that I've come to through the use of magic mushrooms may seem like no-brainers and obvious to others. But in complete honesty, for me, a lot of these things that I've discovered and learned wouldn't have happened without using magic mushrooms as a means to self-discover and really take a look at my life unfiltered, without all the negativity inside my head to steer me wrong. To put it simply, my use of magic mushrooms opened up my eyes to a lot of realities that I was too ignorant to see, too stubborn to accept, and ultimately they helped change my direction and mindset to set me up for a future of success and happiness. I felt that I should share this brief story of some of the most important changes, both mentally and physically, that I have made with my experimentation, quote unquote, because I'm pretty sure that if they could help lead me to a better path, And trust me, I was on a very, very bad path. I wasn't a bad person, but I just had a really bad mindset. I just hope that maybe others can be aware of the potential of magic mushrooms more than just a hallucinogenic or, just having a trippy experience. I mean, yes, you could have fun on these things. They're very, I've had a lot of trips where me and Professor Hadwin were just sitting there busting it up, laughing, having some in-depth conversations and stuff like that. But you can use these as a means to self-discovery and to reshape your thought processes and analyze your life to help you make better decisions. I hope you guys enjoyed what I had to share with you guys today. This is very personal to me, and I really just wanted to get it out there in hopes that maybe somebody could take something from this and learn something. Because I know there's a lot of studies out there that are starting to show that the use of psilocybin can help treat things like mental health problems and addictions and stuff like that. And I could ultimately testify to the fact that yes, these things can work for more ways than one. Like I said, my journey and my progress isn't done yet, but through my use of psilocybin, I have definitely been put on the right track. And it's not that the mushrooms do this to you. They just allow you to do it for yourself easier. Like I said, they break down the walls of conditioning that we've been taught our whole lives. It allows us to step outside the box, see things differently and honestly, and it puts us more in touch with ourselves, who we are as people. And that is true freedom, to be whoever we want to be and to make the decisions that are right for us. Before I end today's episode, I'd like to remind everybody, if you can, please follow us on our YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. Check out our website and our listener support page. It would be deeply appreciated. As always, if you guys have any questions or concerns, comments, please feel free to email us. All the information for all that stuff can be found in the descriptions. Feel free to contact us. And if you can, please leave us some kind of review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We want to know how we're doing, and we want to be able to create the best content possible, so all praise and criticism is welcomed. I know I was trying to get into the habit of ending every episode with a quote, so what I'll do is I'll just say the quote that I opened this episode with again, but this time I'll say it more generally, instead of more geared towards me and my progress that I've made. There is no person more powerful than the one who has been freed from the limitations of their ego. Once again, this is Professor Stark. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Psilocybin University. I hope everybody out there good health and peace and happiness.
Thank you.